Most human beings are exhausted not because life is demanding, but because they are constantly trying to manage what was never meant to be managed. You believe if you can just hold things tightly enough, your relationships, your plans, your reputation, your future, then nothing will go wrong. But look at your own experience honestly. Has holding on made life stable, or has it made you anxious? Control promises safety, but it delivers tension. The tighter your grip, the more fragile you become. You think control gives you strength, but it is born from fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of not knowing what comes next. Life, however, does not function on your fears or your plans. It moves on a scale far larger than your preferences. When you try to dominate it, you don't bend life, you fracture yourself. Like gripping water in your fist, the harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Yet you keep squeezing because letting go feels like defeat. But letting go is not defeat, it is intelligence. Observe this. Everything you are trying to control is changing anyway. Your body changes even while you sleep. Your thoughts shift even while you cling to them. People change, situations dissolve, seasons turn. Control does not stop change, it only makes you suffer during it. When life moves and you refuse to move with it, you experience pain. Not because life is cruel, but because resistance creates friction. Most people say, if I don't control this, everything will fall apart. But what you call falling apart is often just life rearranging itself beyond your expectations. You confuse uncertainty with danger. You confuse unpredictability with chaos. In reality, life is not chaotic. It is just not obedient to your mind. Look closely at how control operates inside you. It shows up as overthinking, constant planning, rehearsing conversations that may never happen, replaying moments you wish you could change. You call this preparation, but it is anxiety disguised as responsibility. True responsibility is responding consciously to what is happening now, not trying to dominate what might happen later. When you drop the illusion of control, something beautiful happens. You don't become careless. You become available, available to respond rather than react, available to act rather than panic. A person who is not obsessed with control sees more clearly because their vision is not distorted by fear. They are not stiff, they are flexible, and flexibility is real strength. Think of a tree in a storm. The rigid tree snaps. The one that bends survives. Control makes you rigid. Letting go makes you resilient. You may worry, if I let go, will I lose ambition? Will I lose direction? No. You will lose compulsiveness, not commitment. You will still act, but your actions will come from clarity, not desperation. There is a vast difference between steering a vehicle and strangling the steering wheel. One moves you forward, the other only leaves your hands sore. Control also feeds your identity. You like to believe, I am the one who keeps everything together. But this identity is heavy. It turns life into a burden instead of an experience. When you loosen your grip, you may feel momentarily empty, even exposed. That is not weakness. That is honesty. For the first time, you are meeting life without armor. And here is the deepest truth. Life functions best when you participate, not when you dominate. A dance does not work if one partner tries to drag the other. When you stop forcing outcomes, intelligence begins to operate naturally within you. Decisions become simpler. Reactions soften. You still move, but without inner violence. Letting go of control does not mean trusting life blindly. It means trusting your ability to respond. Whatever comes, you handle it. That confidence is far more powerful than trying to predict every turn. Human beings often mistake accumulation for intelligence. You gather experiences, memories, opinions, and conclusions, believing that the more you collect, the wiser you become. But look closely. If accumulation alone produced wisdom, the oldest people would be the most liberated. Yet many carry decades of memory and remain trapped in the same patterns. Memory by itself is not wisdom. It is only a record. What you do with that record determines whether it becomes insight or imprisonment. Memory has a practical function. It helps you recognize a face, learn a skill, avoid repeating a mistake. But the moment memory becomes the lens through which you see the present, it stops serving you. Instead of responding to what is happening now, you react to what happened before. The past begins to speak louder than life itself. When that happens, you are no longer living. You are remembering. Notice how easily memory dictates your emotions. Someone says a single sentence, and suddenly an old wound opens. The words spoken today are mild, but the reaction is intense. Why? Because you are not responding to this moment. You are responding to 10 years of stored impressions. The mind does not distinguish between then and now. It only replays what it knows, and whatever it replays, it reinforces. You may say, "I remember because I don't want to repeat the mistake." But see the subtle difference. Learning from the past is not the same as living inside it. Learning is light. Identification is heavy. When memory turns into identity, you say, "This happened to me, so this is who I am." That sentence quietly locks the door to transformation. Wisdom does not mean forgetting everything. It means knowing what deserves your attention and what does not. A truly intelligent person can remember without reliving. They can acknowledge the past without dragging it into the present. Memory becomes a reference, not a residence. Consider this. Every experience you have ever had is finished. It does not exist anywhere except in your mind, yet you allow it to control your present emotions, your decisions, your relationships. You give yesterday authority over today. This is not respect for experience. This is surrender to habit. The mind loves memory because memory is familiar. Even painful memories feel safe because they are known. The unknown requires awareness. It demands that you be present, and presence is uncomfortable for a mind addicted to patterns. So it chooses memory over freshness, repetition over possibility. When you cling to memory, life loses its sharpness. You stop seeing people as they are and start seeing them as they were. You stop meeting situations openly and start judging them prematurely. In trying to protect yourself with memory, you actually block intelligence. Intelligence arises from perception, not recollection. A mind filled with old impressions is like a dusty mirror. No matter how bright the light, the reflection remains dull. Clearing the dust does not destroy the mirror, it allows it to function. In the same way, loosening your grip on memory does not erase your past. It frees your present. You may fear that if you let go of memory, you will become naive. But naivete is not absence of memory, it is absence of awareness. Awareness sees clearly without bias. Memory sees selectively, colored by emotion. When awareness leads, memory falls into its rightful place, as a servant, not a master. This is not about rejecting your experiences. It is about refusing to be ruled by them. You can honor what happened without allowing it to define you. The moment you stop introducing yourself through your past, you open the door to who you can become now. Right now, if you are willing, notice how much of your inner dialogue is repetition. The same judgments, the same conclusions, the same emotional reflexes. This repetition is not life. It is inertia. Life happens only when something new can enter you. Pain is a real experience, but suffering is a choice that often goes unnoticed. When something painful happens, the body reacts immediately. There is a sensation, a shock, a wave that moves through you. That part is natural, it is intelligent, it is life responding to life, but what usually follows has very little to do with pain itself. What follows is the story. Notice this carefully. The pain may last a few seconds, a few minutes, sometimes a few days. But the story can last for years. The mind begins to replay what happened, adding meaning, judgment, blame, and imagination. With every replay, the original pain is resurrected, not because it still exists, but because you are keeping it alive through narration. Most people believe they are suffering because of what happened to them. In reality, they are suffering because of what they keep saying about what happened to them. The event is over, the sensation is gone. But the commentary continues endlessly. You polish it, refine it, explain it to yourself and others, and slowly the story becomes more important than the truth. The mind does not let go of stories easily because stories give identity. This is what happened to me quietly turns into this is who I am. Once that happens, letting go feels like losing yourself. You defend the story not because it is true, but because it feels like home. Even misery feels safer than emptiness to a mind that fears the unknown. Observe how selective the mind is. 10 things may go right in a day, but one thing goes wrong, and that becomes the headline. Why? Because pain is dramatic, and the mind is addicted to drama. The story intensifies the emotion, and the emotion feeds the story. This loop continues until suffering feels permanent, even though the original pain was temporary. Suffering also gives a strange sense of control. When you repeat the story, you feel you are doing something about the pain, but repetition is not resolution. It is rehearsal. You are training your nervous system to react the same way again and again. Over time, the story becomes so familiar that you don't even need a new event to suffer. A thought is enough. Look at your own life. How many pains are you still carrying that no longer exist in reality? The people may be gone, the situations may be over, the circumstances may have changed, yet the emotional reaction remains intact as if nothing has moved on. This is not because you are loyal. It is because you have not questioned the necessity of the story. Ending suffering does not require erasing memory or denying pain. It requires seeing the difference between what happened and what you are repeating. Pain happens in the present moment. Suffering lives in psychological time. When you bring your attention fully into now, the story has no ground to stand on. The body knows how to heal. A wound closes, a bone mends, but the mind keeps reopening what is already healed, not intentionally, but habitually. You think you are being cautious, but you are actually being compulsive. Awareness breaks this compulsion, not force. You may ask, if I drop the story, does that mean what happened was okay? No. Dropping the story does not justify the event. It liberates you from it. Justice is an external matter. Inner freedom is yours alone. Do not confuse the two. Right now, as you listen, notice if any old story is stirring within you. You don't have to fight it. Simply see it as a story, not a truth that needs defending. The moment you stop feeding it with attention, it begins to lose its grip. Pain passes when the body is allowed to do its work. Suffering passes when the mind is allowed to rest. Many people say they are holding on because they love deeply, but if you look honestly, what you call love often feels heavy, anxious, and suffocating. Love, in its natural state, is expansive. It gives freedom. Attachment, on the other hand, tightens. It demands. It fears loss more than it values connection. When holding on creates fear instead of joy, it is no longer love. It is insecurity asking to be reassured. Observe how attachment operates within you. You want people to stay the same, behave the same, feel the same way about you forever. You call this commitment, but underneath it is the fear of change. Life, however, does not promise consistency. Everything that is alive is changing moment by moment. When you expect permanence from what is impermanent, suffering is inevitable. Attachment disguises itself as care. You say, I worry because I care. But look closely. Does your worry help the other person, or does it simply keep your fear occupied? Care empowers, attachment entangles, care allows growth. Attachment demands compliance. One nourishes life, the other tries to cage it. Many relationships become exhausting not because people stop loving each other, but because they start clinging. You want to own emotions, attention, loyalty, but human beings are not possessions. The moment you try to possess life, life begins to resist. What you cling to pulls away. What you give space to often comes closer. Attachment also binds you to outcomes. You want love to guarantee happiness, security, validation. When it does not, disappointment follows. But love was never meant to be a transaction. The moment you attach expectations to it, you turn a living connection into a contract. When the contract is broken, you feel betrayed, even though life never signed it. Notice how attachment affects your inner state. When the object of your attachment is present and behaving as expected, you feel okay. When it is threatened or distant, anxiety arises. Your well-being becomes dependent. This dependence is not love. It is emotional hunger, and hunger can never be satisfied by another person. True love is not about holding tighter. It is about standing freer. It is the joy of connection without the fear of loss. When you love without attachment, you don't become careless. You become graceful. You allow others to be who they are, not who you need them to be for your emotional survival. This does not mean you withdraw or become indifferent. Indifference is numbness. Love without attachment is aliveness without fear. You still feel deeply, but you are not shattered by change. You participate fully, but you do not cling desperately. You walk with life, not against it. Attachment also limits growth. You hold on to versions of people, including yourself. This is how they were. This is who I used to be. Life moves forward, but you stay loyal to outdated images. Love sees what is. Attachment insists on what was. If you truly care about someone, the greatest gift you can offer is freedom. Freedom to grow, freedom to change, freedom to leave if needed. Paradoxically, when people feel free, connection deepens. When they feel trapped, even love becomes a burden. Look at your own attachments, not to judge them, but to understand them. Where does fear replace joy? Where does expectation replace appreciation? Where does holding on replace openness? Awareness alone begins to loosen the grip. Of all the things you carry through life, identity is the heaviest. You may not feel its weight because you have been carrying it for so long, but it determines how you think, how you react, how you suffer, and how much of life you allow yourself to experience. The moment you say, "This is who I am," you have quietly decided who you cannot be, and that decision closes more doors than you realize. Identity is built from memory. What happened to you, what others said about you, what you succeeded at, what you failed at. Slowly, these fragments gather into a solid image, and you begin to defend it. You protect it when it is praised. You protect it when it is attacked. Either way, you are no longer free. You are busy maintaining a structure that exists only in your mind. Notice how easily identity turns life into a struggle. Someone disagrees with you and it feels personal. Someone questions you and you feel threatened. Someone ignores you and you feel diminished. Why? Not because of what they did, but because it touched the image you are trying to preserve. The stronger your identity, the more vulnerable you become. A rigid sense of self cannot bend, so it breaks easily. You may believe identity gives you stability, but in reality, it gives you limitation. Life is a moving process. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago, and you will not be the same 5 years from now. Yet you carry labels as if they are permanent truths. I am like this. I have always been this way. These statements sound harmless, but they quietly resist growth. They tell life, do not enter beyond this point. Identity also creates unnecessary conflict. When opinions become identities, discussion becomes war. When beliefs become identities, learning becomes impossible. You stop listening to understand and start listening to defend. The moment you defend an image, intelligence steps aside. You may win arguments, but you lose openness, and without openness there is no transformation. Look at how identity feeds suffering. If something painful happens, instead of allowing it to pass, you say, "This happened to me." The event becomes personal history. The pain becomes personal meaning. Now it is not just an experience. It is part of who you think you are. Letting go feels impossible because you believe you would be erasing yourself. But what you are erasing is not life. It is limitation. Freedom begins the moment you realize you are not an identity. You are a living presence. Roles, labels, and stories are tools, not definitions. You can use them when needed and put them down when they are not. But most people forget to put them down. They wear their identities even in sleep, and then wonder why rest never comes. When identity loosens, something remarkable happens. You become lighter, not careless. Responsive, not reactive, you can engage fully without being entangled. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not crush you. You still function in the world, but the world no longer controls your inner state. This does not mean becoming empty or passive. It means becoming fluid. A river has no fixed shape, yet it moves with great power. When you drop rigid definitions of yourself, life flows through you more intelligently. You discover that you can change without losing anything essential, because what is essential was never the image. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your energy is spent protecting who you think you are? What if that energy was available for living instead? What if you met each moment without the burden of needing to be someone specific? Many people believe that letting go requires dramatic action. They think they must confront someone, walk away from a situation, change their environment, or make a bold declaration. But letting go is not an outer performance. It is an inner release. You can leave a place and still carry it within you. You can forgive with words and still remain bound. Freedom does not happen in your circumstances. It happens in your relationship with them. Look closely at your own life. How often have you changed situations only to find the same emotions returning in a different form? New people, same reactions. New opportunities, same fears. This is because you moved externally, but inwardly nothing shifted. The pattern traveled with you. Wherever you go, there you are. Letting go is not about erasing events. It is about disentangling your inner state from them. The memory may remain, but the emotional charge does not have to. The fact may exist, but the suffering need not. This separation is subtle, but it is the difference between being scarred and being seasoned. You cannot force letting go. Effort only tightens the knot. The more you say, "I must let this go," the more attention you give it. Attention is nourishment. What you resist, you energize. What you observe without involvement slowly dissolves. Inner release begins with seeing clearly. Not judging, not justifying, simply seeing. When you see that a certain thought, emotion, or attachment no longer serves your well-being, dropping it becomes natural. You don't negotiate with fire after you know it burns. Understanding itself is release. Notice how you carry certain emotions like a habit. Anger resurfaces automatically. Guilt appears without invitation. Sadness returns even when nothing is wrong. These emotions feel personal, but they are patterned responses. They were learned, repeated, reinforced. What is learned can be unlearned, not by fighting, but by becoming conscious. Letting go does not mean becoming indifferent. Indifference is numbness. Inner release brings sensitivity without suffering. You still feel, but feelings no longer imprison you. You experience life directly without dragging yesterday into today. Many people are afraid of letting go because they believe it will make them weak or passive. In reality, clinging is weakness. It takes tremendous inner strength to remain open when things do not go your way. A rigid mind collapses under pressure. A released mind adapts, responds, and rises. There is also fear that if you let go inwardly, others will win, or injustice will go unanswered. But inner freedom is not surrendering your intelligence. You can still act, speak, and correct what is needed without poison inside you. Action taken from clarity is far more effective than reaction born of hurt. Letting go internally also restores your energy. Notice how much vitality is consumed by replaying the past, imagining conversations, rehearsing arguments that never happen. When that energy is released, it becomes available for creativity, awareness, and joy. Life begins to feel spacious again. This inner act does not require time. It requires willingness, not tomorrow, not gradually, in this moment. You are either carrying something or you are not. The moment you stop feeding it, it weakens. The moment you stop identifying with it, it loosens. If you want to know whether you have truly let go, see how quickly you return to balance when something triggers you. Freedom is not absence of triggers, it is the speed of recovery. When you no longer cling, disturbances pass through you like wind through an open window. Right now, as you listen, notice one thing you have been holding onto: a resentment, a fear, an expectation. And instead of analyzing it, simply allow it to be without involvement, and feel what happens when you stop gripping and allow life to move freely through you.